Honestly, titling this episode was not easy. On one hand, Toria is so intentional about her community that her energy is both refreshing and contagious. But when you listen to her speak, it's clear. She really has no limitations. One thing's for sure, the Churchill neighborhood in Richmond, Virginia has much to be proud of. Her life is a living reminder that when I am well, we are well. If you subscribe, great. But more importantly, share this phenomenal conversation because Toria is truly special.
Welcome to another episode of the Somebody's Son podcast, where biting your tongue is never allowed. Young men battle with the pressures of manhood every day. Each episode, we tackle topics that focus on worth, actions, and relationships. Our goal is simple: help men win the war with themselves.
The younger ones always have it easier, though.
Oh yeah, my youngest sister, I'm like, y'all let her do any and everything. I'm just like...
I think that's situational, though. I didn't get it easy.
You were rarity.
Yeah, rarity.
I must be. But the thing is that between Mo and I, there's not... Mo's my older brother. He's only a year and a half older than me, so it's not really like... Yeah. He wasn't really... He was for learning to walk when I was born, you know what I mean? So I don't think... I think maybe they treated us a little bit more equally.
I got 10 years on my brother. So
yeah, so your brother has benefited from the
world is different.
The war that you had to fight, I guess, right? Yeah.
How was that for you, Toria? You had two older sisters, two younger sisters, sandwiched between them.
Yeah, so I am 32. I have a sister who is 30. Okay. I have a sister who's 26. And then my older siblings, my older brother, we are 13 years apart. My older sister, we're like 12 years apart.
Oh, wow.
So like they were much older when I came along. And so in a lot of ways, like I look at myself as like the oldest, especially for my younger sisters, because like once my older siblings were like out of the house, out to college, like it was me, my younger siblings. So amongst my family, I'm like known as like the wannabe mom, like telling everyone what to do, bossing people around, giving advice and all of that stuff. So that's kind of our dynamic.
And have you found that your younger siblings, have they followed your motherly advice, guidance?
Oh no, they are like, who are you to tell me what I should do? Especially my youngest sister, who's like firecracker. Like
that's typical of young.
Like
right?
I'm just like, girl, like we need to help you out. She's just like her own free spirit, and so we have a really good bond, all of us, but all very different. Yeah, all very different.
Pandemic has been phenomenal for some, and could be very troubling for others. From the outside looking in. I feel like you're one of the few folks I would say beat the pandemic. You got engaged during the pandemic, started a business in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And that's just the outside looking in. So I'm like, yo, Toria's beating the pandemic.
I think that points to like the whole concept of like you see the highlight reels, like the good. So I would never say good did not come out of the pandemic for me, or that I didn't experience growth or accomplishments in certain ways. Like you said, I did get engaged. I started a business that I've been just like enjoying that experience. But at the same time, there were shifts that I'm like, whoa, like this has been tough. Shifts that I think we're all experiencing. And I try to keep everything in perspective. Like when we were doing like the mic check and you asked me about my morning, and I'm like joking, like every morning I'm opening my computer, I'm logging into Zoom, I'm staring at that same computer for like 8, 10, 12-hour days. That's been tough on me. That's been, something that I am ready to move away from. I'm ready to get back in the office, interact face to face with people, get some of that energy that really helps me like create and innovate and do all the things that I love to do. So there have definitely been a lot of great moments. But I would say there are also things where I'm like, okay, I'm over this and this is not what I like.
Yeah.
That's been, if I'm being honest, that's been the most troubling thing for me, is that I seem, amongst the people that I've been working with, I seem to be the only one who wants to like be in person interacting, just because, you know, my nature, like in a room with multiple people, like bouncing ideas off of each other is where I feel like the most alive, right?
Yeah.
And so that's been, I share that with you. I think that's been one of the most difficult things, is that everybody wants to work remote now.
And it's like, for me, it's like, I want the freedom of choice. So if there are days where I don't want to go into the office and work from home, I can do that.
Right.
But like to not be able to, like to the point that, so the space that I manage for the company that I work for, like it's a dope space, state of the art, innovation center, a lot of great creativity and energy around. Like I am banned right now from going to that space. Like my ID won't work to swipe me in. Like I can't go there because we're still on like a work from home mandate. So, you know, I want the freedom of choice to be able to access that space when I feel I need to access it. But on days where maybe it's really cold outside and I don't feel like driving to the office and putting on clothes, like I can work from home. So
I'm okay with not wearing jeans for the rest of my life.
I know you were. I knew you were going to say that, but because I know
what's wrong with jeans?
Like sweats.
Yeah, he's a relaxing guy.
Yeah.
I knew you were going to say that though, because I know what your incentives are. You know what I mean? Like I know what you want, so that makes sense.
I would say, from a like work perspective, I'm okay with remote. I don't ever have to go back to the office. I'm okay with that. But personal connectivity with the creative world, with other entrepreneurs, that's something I'm definitely interested in and would love to be in the same room with. Yeah. But for my 9 to 5, I can do that.
I guess because like so much of the nature of my work is like interfacing with people and like connecting in that way. I feel like I am at a disadvantage when it's all over Zoom. Like I was telling you earlier, like I am running an accelerator program for Black-owned restaurants right now. And like comparing the experience of this cohort to past cohorts where we're in the innovation center, we're, you know, seeing each other, you know, even simple things like the organic collisions that come out of like, we meet up at the coffee machine together or we're having lunch together. Like that's absent. And so much, in my opinion, grows out of that space. So it's like, yeah, I can curate an experience over Zoom, but at the end of the day, it's like when this person wants to turn their camera off or go on mute or like end, you know, their time on the Zoom call for the day, that's it. Yeah. Whereas like being in person, I feel like I just got a lot more richness out of my experiences. So
I didn't know this. I knew you were in the financial services space. I knew that you were doing meaningful work in the financial services space because I made sure I looked up the Innovation Center. I did not realize that there was a lens on Black and Brown entrepreneurs and helping them from an acceleration perspective on their business. That's amazing.
I mean, a big part of like my why and like the work that I do is like whenever I have a seat at the table, making sure that I'm putting on for like me and mine. So like when I took on the role and like backing up just a little in my storytelling, like I never saw myself like in this space. Like for the entirety of like the first portion of my career, I worked in the education space. So when most people think of Toria, they're like, oh yeah, Toria, she did something with kids. Like, didn't she help kids get into college or wasn't she a teacher? And so now I'm in this space where like my work is very much rooted in supporting entrepreneurs. It's like, how can I still bring like the intentionality of creating opportunities and experiences and, you know, just growth for people who look like me, who come from where I come, who are struggling with things that, you know, are struggles that are universal across, you know, my demographic. So in my work, you know, I have a lot of autonomy to innovate. And so one of the things I said was like, we have accelerator programs that are focused on, you know, your high growth startups, tech-based startups. Why can't we adopt a similar model to support other entrepreneurs who are looking to grow, who are looking to do that in an accelerated manner? So really just having an opportunity to really understand the needs that are out there and get real creative about how to bring solutions to them. So, you know, with the accelerator, working with the restaurants, it's like, how do I take the resources that are behind me through the company that I work for and bring them to those entrepreneurs? So yeah, it's an exciting space to be in.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself, Ali asked this question of Chris and I in a previous episode. I'm going to ask this of you because I'm just curious what your response would be.
I was going to go there next.
Yeah. So you own your own business, started your own business.
Mm-hmm.
Without knowing your financials on that business, I am a customer of yours. So I'm personally rooted in yours, rooted in seeing you be successful, and you have a phenomenal business. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
I think on the other side, though, here you have a seat at the table inside of one of the most celebrated businesses on the face of the planet, right? And in the financial services space, and you're able to create meaningful impact for people that look like you, who don't sit at that type of table and don't have a voice there. What does that look like? Like, what is that duality? Is it difficult? Is it not difficult? Do you find yourself being pulled in one direction over the other, or?
I mean, there are a couple of things. So I think a big part of it is like always being authentic to self. So like, I consider myself to be a very empathetic person, just always very, understanding and in tune with what other people's experiences are, what their needs are, and looking for ways to be a help, to be a support. And so I see that come out through, my 9-to-5 work. I see it come out through, my own small business. I think the other piece of it is just balance. So I will say like starting North 24th Home, my small business during the pandemic, was really like something that I felt I had to do. I'm like, okay, I'm a couple years into this role where I'm working with entrepreneurs every single day. I need to make sure that I can walk the walk for like the talk. Like if I'm sitting down with entrepreneurs every day to, help them figure out how to grow, to scale, to strengthen their business, I probably need to have some experience in the business space myself. When I consider like what I'm really good at, it really is understanding needs and bringing solutions to it. So like I'm in a space, that's my job, that's what I do. But like some of the nuances and complexities that come along with actually being in it, knowing what it's like to go from ideation to getting your legal entity set up, to figuring out, how do I make sure I'm reaching customers, or, getting my brand out there, to how do I make sure that I sustain this thing that I've put out into the world. Like those were all things where I was like, I can't just listen to podcasts or read books or like have it rub off from, other entrepreneurs onto me. Like I need to get my hands dirty, so to speak, and do it myself. And simultaneously, it just so happened that like I was in a space where it was like, I'm doing this work and I'm like helping a lot of entrepreneurs like get real good. Like I could probably do that for myself. And getting past the fear of like, who am I to like start a business? I don't know anything about like starting a business, to like, actually, a lot about starting a business, like try it for yourself. And I think the other piece of it was like really working through like maybe the limitations I placed on myself, but like, for 12 years, I worked in education. So it was also this moment of like, what are people going to say if I start a natural cleaning product business? What the heck is Toria doing? Like, she has her master's in education. She works for this company. Like, what is that? But ultimately, like at the end of the day, it was like, I'm curious about a lot of things. There are a lot of things I want to do. There are a lot of, talents that I have to contribute to the world. Like, why not do it all?
Yeah.
Do you feel like, sometimes I struggle with this, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs do you feel like you are your work? And a lot of like I feel like I told Lang this, I said, there are things that I feel like if I don't accomplish, a part of me is not fulfilled. Do you feel that way about your work?
In some ways. So when it goes back to the point I made earlier about like at the end of the day, no matter where my seat is, like I'm really focus on supporting my community, you know, reaching back, reaching up, reaching to the side, and making sure others get opportunities, resources. That feels like a part of me. Like, I feel like as a Black person, a Black woman, like, that's a responsibility of mine. I can't divorce that from Toria, who I am as a being. But in terms of like, I am not one of those people who are like, work is life. Like, I could wake up tomorrow and decide, I don't want to work for this company anymore. I don't want to do this role, and go into another space and try something else, do something differently. But I think ultimately, if I have space, opportunity to positively impact people who look like me, who are oftentimes overlooked, passed up on opportunities, like, I feel like I'm doing what me tells me to do, what I'm supposed to do, what I'm called to do.
What is okay, so now that you've gotten your hands dirty, what is the important thing that you've learned that you feel like you were missing when you weren't, when you didn't have your own business before?
So a lot of my 9-to-5 work is focused on like bringing resources to entrepreneurs and small business owners to help them grow. And so I think having experience like standing up a small business and nurturing that, I think what I've learned is like, you have to have a lot of intentionality as a service provider, as a resource provider, about how you're connecting those resources to small business owners. You can't assume that every small business owner knows who you are, knows what resources you have, and are going to come to you looking for them. Or even like a really explicit example. So I'm running this accelerator program that I built for the Black-owned restaurants. I could have decided, you know, for this 12-week program, I want, you know, the restaurant owners to log into Zoom every Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 3 a.m. to participate in workshops and meet with mentors. But like, when I sit down and talk to the entrepreneurs, they're like, we're operating our business. Like, that's not feasible for us. I can't step away from my restaurant to do 10 hours of programming with you all. So like, me understanding, like, from the lens of the actual business owner, like, what's going to work, what's going to be accessible, what's going to reach them, and really drive the impact that I think we all want to see take place. And so like with the program, I had to say, okay, let me look at the schedules of all the restaurants. Let me sit down and say like, or ask them like, what makes sense for you? What do you need so that you can fully access this program? And so we landed on like on a biweekly basis. We're meeting with them on Mondays, like starting in the morning, because for the most part, the restaurants are closed on Mondays. It's their day that they typically held for like their own growth and development or administrative tasks. So now, like, we have this wonderful program, but we also have a wonderful program that the people we're hoping to reach can truly access. So I think it's like part of it is just like, you know, when I was starting North 24th Home and thinking about like what resources were out there, like there would be workshops in the middle of the day. And so I'm like, well, you know, North 24th Home is like my side hustle. So not only am I'm not able to access it because I have a 9-to-5 and I can't just say, oh, like team, I'm not going to, you know, dial into this meeting because I'm going to go work on my own thing. Like just thinking about those nuances. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I've picked up on, like being really intentional from like the perspective of, you know, my 9-to-5 work and being a resource to entrepreneurs and better understanding like the user experience and how I can make sure that I am setting out or I'm doing what I set out to do.
I'm so glad you've compartmentalized the difference between access and impact. And it's very telling and humble of you to put yourself in the position of a small business owner, entrepreneur. So now you too now can see things from their lens, which is, and I say this all the time, a lot of times right now, folks are focusing on, well, you have access to this or you have access to this. But if it can't create the impact, then do I truly have access?
Yeah.
Because you can't impact businesses if you say, hey, you can reach us between 9 to 5, but that's when their core business is. Yeah, they might have access, but do they really? You're not really creating any real meaningful impact. And your willingness to be not only flexible, but to adapt the access program to their schedule means you truly are valuing what impact am I making. I'm not just here to have a shingle where people can say, oh, Toria's running this amazing innovation center. Like, no, like, who are you actually helping innovate?
Yeah, and I think like it all comes down to like, I never want to be that person who like, I'm just doing it for show. Like, yeah, we can get the article write up about this amazing program that we did, or take the photos and, you know, put it out there. Like at the end of the day, like I want those small business owners to return to their business and be like, this has really helped me, because the trickle down impact of that is what I want to see. Like, what does it look like that now this small business owner who's gotten all of these capacity building supports and funding resources can now hire more people from the community or build for their family. So like, again, it goes back to my why. Like, how do I put on for people who look like me, for people from my community, and to not show up with a certain level of intentionality to really do that, not just talk about doing it, but really do it. Like, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I didn't do it that way. So, yeah.
The level of care and intentionality that you speak of is refreshing to hear, from at least from my personal experience with creating a small business and not knowing what resources are available. I firmly believe that, and especially in our community, if we knew what resources were available, if we knew the level of access that we could have, I think more people would be more inclined to take those chances.
Yeah.
And it's very tough to take those chances without it.
Yeah.
And with it, there's a level of comfort that I can, even just hearing you in the conversation we had previously about the things that your incubator does, I can see how my journey would be different just having access to those. And I'm very excited to, if I were in the position to have benefited from your program, I would scream from the mountaintop, hey, this is a program that's very good, and share that with other. When you're a small business owner, you in entrepreneur, you always meet other people who are either in this space or trying to get into this space. And having that trickle down effect is important. That's how we grow. And I think because ownership for me is important in our community. Without ownership, we don't have anything that we can call our own. We don't have anything that we can rely on. We don't have anything we can build from. You need that core foundation, whether it be real estate, restaurant, tech business, media company, whatever it is. We have to have a level of control. And programs like the program you develop, I think it is very, very important for our community. I want to do whatever I can within my power to make sure that that knowledge is spread out a whole lot more.
Well, you said something that made me think of something that like I'm constantly thinking about. And I think like this theme, if you will, like it goes back to when I was in the classroom and like when I was working in the education space with students and I talked to adults around me, like all of the brainstorming and ideation and so-called problem solving was really focused on like fixing the kids, like they don't do this because of this, or like they're not coming to this, workshop because of this. And I've always taken the approach of being super self-aware and super self-reflective. Like if I'm hired to do a job, I need to make sure that I'm doing that job. So I can't come to the table with excuses all day that like, oh, the kids don't come to, the tutoring after school because of X, Y, and Z. It's like, okay, if I'm hired to make sure that they learn and tutoring is a part of that, what do I need to do differently to make sure that they can access and then have that impact? Same holds true in this space. Like business owners, like they're not problematic. They're not people in need of correction. They just need us to take down any barriers that exist or obstacles that are in front of them to accessing the resources. And so like at the end of the day, when I'm sitting down and thinking about my work, it's always like, what can I do differently to impact better? Not like, what do they need to be doing or how do they show up better? So I think that's a big part of it because there are so many resources out here. But in talking to small business owners, I hear the same thing all the time. Like, I didn't know there were, these programs out here or these organizations that are there to help. I didn't know that this resource was available to me. And I think part of it is because those who are in the space of crafting those opportunities, standing them up, aren't always doing it with the lens of what's the user experience of the person that I'm trying to impact. Yep. And if you don't get really intimate with that, like there's always going to be misalignment and mismatch.
Mm-hmm. You said something when she was talking. You said something about, and we were talking on the phone earlier this week, but I want you to bring it up because I know I won't do it justice. And you were talking about the difference between pointers
and guiders.
Yes.
So I learned this.
Before you say that, you're a guider, by the way.
You're a guider.
So I want to put. When you were talking, I was like, you can't teach this, man. So go ahead, by all means.
I want to make sure this is I credit the right people. So there is a company called it's a counseling service called Marriage Perfectly Imperfect, and they're based out of the Richmond area. And I went to a seminar that Mecca put together for Black Mental Health Week at Very Ashley's boutique in Stony Point Mall. Plugging everybody, right?
I love that.
And it was a great seminar. And one of the things that they mentioned, April and Daryl are the owners of that business. One of the things that they mentioned was knowing the difference between guiders and pointers. Pointers can say, "Hey, go that way," and just point you in direction, just leave it to yourself. Guiders can say, "I'll show you. Come with me, and I can take you to where you want to go." You sound like a guider, and that's more of what we need in the entrepreneurial space. There are a lot of people who point, whether it's point, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, and you have to really be centered in what you want to accomplish in order to filter through the good advice, the bad advice, that person is just afraid and wouldn't do it themselves, so discount that. This person is never done it before, so why would I even listen to you? Not in a disrespectful way, but it's a lot of self-reflection you have to do in the process of building the business and trying to accomplish the mission you're trying to accomplish. And again, as a small business owner, having people who are willing to take the time, understand the time restrictions that entrepreneurs have, especially if you're working a 9-to-5 and you're building a media company on the side.
Which if you look at the data, especially amongst Black-owned businesses, that's the reality for the majority. I think the last data point I saw was like 90% of Black-owned businesses are ran by a sole proprietor who is moonlighting, essentially. They have a 9-to-5 that they're using to resource and help fund their passion, their idea of their business. And so again, from a resource standpoint, you got to be mindful of that. If you don't know that, you're going to develop programs and host webinars and workshops when they can't access them. And so even though you want to make the impact, because they can't access it, the impact never happens. So there's so much.
It depends on the goal. Because I'm gonna take it a step further. Not everybody running innovation hubs, incubators, and acceleration hubs like you have that goal. Some people do just want the article.
Or the title.
Oh yeah.
Right? And so
or some equity.
Yeah. And so this idea of being a guide, I'm going to take it a step further. I know we're talking about business, but I recognize that you fit in the most successful demographic in the country right now, right? Which is more women are educated than than men. More Black women are educated than any other demographic. The year over year increases in net worth, the ones that has the fastest increase year over year is Black women. If my mama was here, she'd say, Black women in our community have always been the guides, particularly in this country. And so my question for you is, was that honed, right? Because we didn't grow up together. We grew up in the same general city, but I remember you I met you through Chris, but I remember your biggest splash, at least on my radar, was 2015. 2015, you won Top 40 Under 40. You were a director in the education space. I had read about this person. I didn't know you went to collegiate until today. It totally makes sense now. But I knew you had went to UVA. You were around guides in the city like Kelly Lemon. And I saw the work that you were doing at Armstrong.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so when you fast forward to where you are now, like, although you transferred from education to business, I'm just like, yo, she been an outlier. Like, what y'all talking about? Like, so.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, like, I tell people all the time, like, growing up, I was in this constant state of like dichotomy. So I grew up in Churchill, one of the most impoverished communities in the city of Richmond. And I'm going to caveat that with saying like, my family was okay. It wasn't like my family was struggling a lot, but a lot of struggle was around me. And one thing that my parents valued was like education. And so my parents did not send me to the schools in my community. They made sure that they got scholarships and figured it out, whether they had to sell, property or whatever, to be able to get me to go to collegiate, college preparatory school. Costs, I don't even know what tuition is now, probably like
it's very expensive.
30 something thousand a year. You're talking like college tuition. My parents were not paying that. I was on scholarship. But I bring that up because I was always in this space of like navigating two worlds, so to speak, but maintaining who I authentically am. Like I would leave my community where the house that my parents own is surrounded by 4 public housing communities. And I would drive 40 minutes to Collegiate where like Windsor Farms is right there. And you see these huge mansions. And like when we turned 16, I had friends who were getting like brand new G-Wagons as their birthday gift. And it was like, whoa, like this is not like what I see in my community. And so like just constantly seeing those two worlds and shifting in between them, like I've always had this sense of like purpose or commitment to figuring out not how to take people from Churchill and get them to Windsor Farms, because I don't think that's necessarily like the goal, but how to make sure like any barriers that stand between a person being able to reach whatever goal they set for themselves, like how do I do my part to take that down? So my work at Armstrong in the education space was like, when I went to collegiate, I felt like I had a really good educational experience. Like I learned a lot. I remember, so my mom got really sick my 10th grade year and, going to collegiate, which is a private school, they don't have school buses and stuff. And so my parents had to make the decision to pull me out of collegiate because I wasn't going to have someone who could take me back and forth to school and, basketball practice and lacrosse practice and all of those things. So I switched from private school to public school, Richmond Public Schools. I went to Thomas Jefferson. That's where I met Chris. Started there my 11th grade year. And I remember my first day of class, like I was in my 11th grade English class and Miss Walsh, she had us do like a writing assignment and she asked us to just like write about our summer. So, teachers first day, they're not, hitting you with the hard stuff. Yeah. So I wrote about my summer, turned it in. I remember later that day, I think I was in my Spanish class, Mr. Eli. And Miss Walsh like comes through the door and she's like, I need to talk to you in the hall. And so like at this point, I'm like scared. I'm like, dang, it's just my first day at a new school. Like, what did I do? And I come out in the hall and she's like, you can't be in my English class. Like, we need to put you in AP. And I was like, okay. So next day of school, I'm now sitting in AP English, pretty much predominantly amongst seniors, 12th graders. And I remember we pull out the syllabus and like, I lied to you not. Every book that was on the AP English syllabus, I have read in 6th grade. Every single book. And so like, I think that was like the moment in my head. I was like, yo, what is going on here? Like, I'm starting to pick up on inequities that just don't feel right. Like, and so like, just kind of being in that space and having the experiences that I did, like, I've always felt this sense of purpose of like, how do I make sure that if a student from Thomas Jefferson wants to go on to become an entrepreneur or, I don't know, a farmer or a doctor or a lawyer, like they have the opportunity to do that. Because when I looked at the kids who went to collegiate with me, whatever they wanted to do,
they could do it.
They could do it.
There's so much to unpack here.
This is so much to unpack. The first time I talked to Chris about textbooks in TJ, he was in tears. He was pissed that the social studies book that he had, almost 10 years later?
It was, so I was graduating. I was coming from my last semester at VCU, and I needed to get my transcript to get the foreign language exception because I was in the magnet program, so I had to take a lot of years of foreign language in high school. So I already passed the requirement for VCU, so I had to do that to graduate. So I didn't know where to get my transcript from. I went to TJ. I went to the school and said, hey, where can I find my transcript? I walk in the office, the main office, and I see the purple social studies book that I had when I was in the 10th grade. I was in the 10th grade in 2000, help me with the math here.
So 6 years later, roughly.
6 years later, roughly. And I was just shocked that so much has changed. I'm like, Barack Obama is like the president now. And the textbooks that these kids have don't even have that in the books. If they didn't read the news and the only information they had to rely on was just that book, it's not up to date.
Yeah.
I was pretty upset about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was pretty passionate about it.
Garrett Westlake, I don't know if you know him. He runs the Da Vinci Center out of VCU. Yeah, he's the head there. Shout out to Garrett Westlake. When I sat down and talked with him, first of all, I need your number after this because I am an entrepreneur that needs help, right? But when I was at VCU, just seeking, wisdom and stuff to build businesses and just to become a better entrepreneur and whatever, I remember sitting down with him and having a conversation, and he built his own business and then decided to teach at private school, right? Before switching over to be the head of Innovation Center at VCU. And I asked him, I was like, is it so different, private school? And you know what he said? I'd never send my kids to public school. I'd never send them to public school.
And I'm careful about how I talk about my experience in public school versus private school because it wasn't all bad. Like, one thing that was of value, there were people who looked like me.
Right.
That within itself, created a lot of richness in me to be able to go in classrooms and see teachers who look like me, to see students who look like me, counselors, folks working in the office. That was new to me. I did not have a single teacher of color when I was at collegiate. So you're talking about what are you in 11th grade, 16, 17? That's my first time having someone who looked like me imparting knowledge in the classroom to me. That's something I would never take away from my experience in public school. When I think about the friendships that I built and the people around me, just people who had shared experience, lived experience, that there was a lot of value there. I will also say, I had teachers who I used to be critical as hell of them. Why aren't they teaching better? Or don't they want more from us? They're giving us this easy stuff, not challenging us. But as I got older and I was able to reflect, it's you got to understand the disparities in resources. At collegiate, I'm going to a school where every student's family is paying $30,000 plus in tuition. Even down to the books. They didn't give us books. Just like in college, you got to buy your books. That was the case at collegiate. So when I think about the things that I look back on and I really value, we were challenged in the classroom and we had these excellent resources. It's a byproduct of the resources that are poured into that space. And I'm able to recognize how in the public school system, they don't have all of those resources. And so, hats off to the teachers who I had in public school who, despite not having all the resources and the luxuries and the bells and whistles and the beautiful building and, the parents, on the PTA who are going to buy whatever you need for your classroom, they still showed up every day. They still tried their very best. They still wanted good for students. And so I don't think when I was 16, 17, 18 years old, I really valued that or, saw just how important what they were doing in spite of everything was. But as an adult and having been in the classroom and now able to look back, it's they really were sacrificing. They really were.
I'm a product of public schools, Richmond Public Schools, then VCU, then University of Richmond. And my brother went to St. Chris from 6th grade to graduation. And when I tell you my brother's 10 years younger than I am, and it's a large discrepancy. He went on scholarship, but they didn't pay for books. So I'm in college paying for my books and his books at the same time. But the level of education that my brother got at St. Chris compared to what I got. I saw it immediately. Like even now, there are things that my brother knows and things that he's interested in. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? And why do you have time for that? But it's the level of education that he received in his pivotal years that I didn't get.
Yeah.
In Richmond Public Schools, and I loved my teachers. I was talking about Mr. Dupree this week, my wife, just talking to her about him. I feel as though I can see where I was disadvantaged in it, but also on the other side, it gave me a level of, how do I put this? Looking at where I am now, I'm very empathetic to people in the public school, to the kids in the public school system right now. And I want to do anything in my power to help them because I want to be able to show that you can make it out. You can, regardless of circumstance, there are choices that need to be made and there may be resources that are lacking, but there are people who are out here pushing the envelope to say, hey, this is achievable.
Yeah.
Right? We built this space to show, one reason why is to show people it's possible.
Yeah.
You can literally do it. And it doesn't matter if you went to school with the U crops or not, right? It doesn't matter if your family's a billionaire or you're a single parent, struggling economically growing up. We have to take those chances. It circles back around to what you were saying about being a resource entrepreneur. You have to take those chances and people need to see the possibilities. People need to see. One thing that I struggled with when I was in college, trying to find my way. What do I want to major in? You can go to med school, you can be an engineer, you can be a doctor, like a lawyer. And I'm just like, I don't know any of these people. I don't know what a doctor does all day at work. I know you make a lot of money, but outside of that, it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know what a lawyer does. I can't see the path of these careers and then understand the choices and the decisions that have to be made in order to get to that point. And that was a huge gap for me. And school doesn't teach you that, right?
Yeah.
I think
now
doesn't teach you that now. But
it can though.
It can with people like us.
Yes, that's exactly what I was about to
We have to be able to
because-
reach back.
So whether it's the private school or the public school, I don't know how much of that is taught. I think maybe in the, private school, maybe like through the resources, you're exposed to a little bit more, but like I think a lot of it is the social capital piece. So what's outside of the classroom, like the kids I went to collegiate with, like when they're hanging out at, their friend's house, like, and parents' friends come over, you got like a psychologist at the table or hanging out in the backyard. You got a doctor, a lawyer, you got, a housewife or a house husband. You got, someone who is an engineer. And so kids are picking up on that. That's not necessarily in the classroom. Whereas, in other spaces, like if I think about my neighborhood and like I said, like 4 housing communities, public housing communities surround like the block I live on, many of those people, they're not doctors and lawyers. They're people who are super resilient and working really hard to survive and figure out ways to try to thrive, but just different social capital space. But I never place more value on one than the other because I think about the kids I went to collegiate with and, one wrong thing goes, left in their life and like they're in shambles because they haven't been around people who can teach them the power of resiliency and, being determined and, forging through life's challenges and adversity. But the kids who were in my neighborhood, they sure as hell know how to do that. That's their life.
That's why I place more value on the resilience side on the opposite spectrum because the disadvantage you have is you can't necessarily afford to feel. I can't afford to be depressed, right? I don't have enough financial stability to be depressed. We have to continue to work, have to push through that.
Yeah.
But not just from a resiliency perspective, but also empathy. I feel we are very empathetic. I look at my neighbors. Like I went across the street to Miss Fran. She was an older woman who lived across the street from me. She knows my whole life. And she still remembers a story about there was a hurricane here and like the branches were all over her front door. She couldn't get out. So I went over there and just cleared her front door for her. That was 10 plus years ago. She still remembers it. Right. And when she met my wife, she told that story. And just there's a level of community. There's a level of feel. Like I think we're more empathetic to other people because of the struggles that we have. And I think on the other side, when you have those kids that went to collegiate in St. Christmas, and go ahead and say what it is, you have, because everything is kind of set up for you and you don't really have to think outside of whatever's already designed for you, like the paths are already designed for you, it's hard to be empathetic to the struggles and how resilient people have to be in the same spot.
Not necessarily. See this. So this is why I said education yet. I think this generation, our generation, you have enough Torias who had to deal with this duality, right, of being in Churchill and collegiate, that now that she's on paper, you couldn't tell you.
Not enough.
Hold on. What I'm saying. Let me finish though. On paper, like people might not know your story until they talk to you, right? So you face that duality, but now you face life with that same level of purpose and intentionality. And so you're bringing something different to the small business owners that you're working with every day, right? But not for that duality, you may go about that a little differently. And what I'm saying is, I believe if we start looking at, and you know this already, I look at education places as social hubs. That's what we should call them. They're social hubs. The exchange of social capital thus far has been limited. But this generation can change that. We can move with a certain level of intentionality that then says, Chris, you may not be able to see a doctor or a lawyer or an architect or an executive in your neighborhood. Doesn't matter. When you come to the social hub, we gonna make sure we curate that for you. And the reason I say that is because Dr. Carlton Good does that for VCU. His freshman class, he takes all black and brown kids, he put them in a classroom, and he says, I don't care where you came from, if you from the 757 or if you from Churchill, you from Southside, I don't care where you're from. He has seen from a social hub experience that some of the kids from Northern Virginia have different experiences from other kids. It doesn't stop him from still giving all of them what it looks like to have connectivity to entrepreneurs. What does it mean to have connectivity to business executives? And then he takes it a step further and he says, let me also curate. We're going to make sure you know what etiquette classes. We're going to make sure you get your first suit. That's what I love about Shaka. Shaka did the same thing when he was a head coach at VCU. People notice he got millions of dollars to go coach men's basketball, but when his first extension came up, the first thing he said is, okay, I want to make sure all my players have suits. And so that's what I'm saying. I think there's enough of us that are coming.
We're shifting a direction.
Exactly.
I want this to be more the norm, right? And I'll tell you why it is an exception right now, because all the great work that Toria is doing right now, we went to high school together. I didn't know until today, right? And it's no fault. I'm not pointing fingers here. It's just that it's not common enough yet. And I think we need to work towards that.
Yeah. And I think so. Couple of thoughts, like based on what you were saying, I think yes, but like I also oftentimes feel this immense level of responsibility that I don't know that I can always live up to. So let me unpack that a little bit. So you called off the stats, like, you know, Black women, education, earnings, like you're doing good, you're top percent. True. But also recognizing that, like, in some ways, I'm the first in my family to really get there. So, like, the thought of passing that on to my kids, that's definitely a goal for me. But I also got to think, okay, like, how do I help my parents out? Or, you know, my grandparents, do they need help? And so, like, I almost feel split in a number of directions. And then there's also this, like, sense of responsibility of, like, you know, the people in my community or the people at the high school I graduated from. And so, like, there's that piece, whereas, you know, some of my colleagues who are achieving and, you know, earning the same as me, like, their parents are going to put the down payment on their home. So my 6 figures looks a lot different than their 6 figures. So
a whole lot different.
So I think, like, there are more and more people who have that dual experience or just have accomplished and, you know, have opportunity and a responsibility to go and give back. But, like, I also think that, like, in some ways that can be a challenge because it's like, you have achieved whatever you've achieved, and you're trying to like just continue to hold on to that and sustain that and like make sure that you're taking care of your family and whatnot. You layer that on with like, how do you care for your whole community? Like that's sometimes like,
it's a weight.
Yeah.
And it's very fragile. If you take a look at what you have to do with the company you work for and how you've changed your program to benefit the schedule of people that you're trying to serve, that's a risk within itself. Because if your company is not okay with it, they want everything to be in a certain format, then you're at a tough spot. So what direction do you take? It's more fragile being in this situation, being in this position is more fragile than I think people realize. And that's one of the biggest like struggles that I have with my peers, my coworkers, things like that is we may do the same thing for work, but our lives are vastly different. And if you knew the amount of pressure that and responsibility that I put on myself, you would probably see me different. But also, I don't even bother sharing that because I always think they're not going to get it.
It's like the risk if it doesn't work. So like I pitch this idea, I socialize it. I'm like, okay, I need them to approve the funding so I can give these grants to the businesses. I need them to okay for me to like put the shingle out that we're focusing on Black owned restaurants. All right. So I get the green light to go. What if it doesn't work out? Like that's going to fall back on me. And so there is this immense sense of responsibility and, a level of risk. But I think the way I've looked at it is like, what's the risk if I don't try, if I don't do it? Because I never want someone to say, because even when I switched to the corporate space, I was like, I don't know how I feel about it. It's not on brand for me. Like I've worked in the public sector all my life. Like people are going to start being like, oh, Toria sellout. She working for, the man or whatever you want to say. Yeah. And like, I think for me, it really was like, if I'm in this space, I need to make sure that no one can question my intentions of having the seat at the table. Because do I need to be at this table? No. Is it a table that I sought? Really? No. But I recognize the impact that I can make. Yes. And, the resources that I can funnel down. And so I need to make sure when I'm showing up, like, even if it's risky, even if it's scary, even if like, it could get me fired if I keep saying like, oh, we going to focus on so-and-so and y'all been putting your attention on so-and-so and y'all not paying attention to so-and-so. Like not everyone's with that message at the end of the day, but I'm willing to take on that risk because if I don't, I don't. And the risk of not doing it is far greater to me and my community.
I agree with 1,000% of what you just said. The pull that you feel often, I think now you have a community of people who not only were they feeling that way, because we're not the first ones, I believe, to feel that pull, but I do think we're vocal about it. So I think by virtue of you even sitting here, there will be women who see this, there will be men who see this and be like, I got to figure out who Toria is because I'm feeling that too. I Am Athlete, they talked about this and they said in our community, wealth has to flow up. We still got to worry about our parents as opposed to some of our contemporaries, wealth is flowing down. So, they don't have some of the same nuances. I think the other thing though, and this is what I love this room so much. So shout out to T for designing this room so much. I love this room more than any other room in the whole house. And it's because of the ancestors that we have on the wall. Our ancestors had the same kind of risk, if not more. And they said, if not me, who?
Yeah, no, that's
who?
fact.
Who's gonna do that? And so I think this is why it's so important for me in media, and there's a number of dudes and women, Lena Waithe, Issa Rae, Ava DuVernay, Deion Taylor, Kenya Burris. There's enough people right now, Antonio Knox, Ryan Coogler, what's his name? Start with an S. He's here. Sherrod Green. There's enough folks right now where we're saying, okay, it's not enough just for me and Toria to have that conversation when we doing a couples wind down, or to hear about it when, you know, Tia and Chris, we went and did a couples getaway. It's not enough for us to do that. We have to put it on camera, because if we don't, there may be someone right now in a very similar seat, Toria, and they're like, you know what? It's time for me to prioritize me and mine. This responsibility is way too heavy. I've taken the risk. I didn't get the reward.
Yeah.
And this conversation will humanize where they are, right? And so that's why, number one, I'm super thankful that you decided to come sit down. I tried to get her for multiple months, by the way, but the timing worked out. But that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Like right now, I believe our generation, and I'm always sensitive, and I put time in context. So the country's not that old. And then when you add what has happened to our communities in this country, that ain't that old either. So it will be us that feel that weight. I also think, though, we're uniquely qualified to usher in a shift. That's why I say talk about education.
We are.
If there's going to be some leaders, it's going to be these folks.
It's going to be us. I just, my biggest, like, the mental block that I have is I need the other communities to understand. Like, I know we have people in place who can push the community forward, and all that's fine. Like, that's going to happen. We are moving in a direction the right way. But please don't act like you don't understand. And if you don't understand what's happening in our community, you have to watch content like this. You have to see people who might be your colleague at work, might be a friend in school. Like, you never know people's stories. We have to share those stories. It's just very frustrating. I feel like there's a level of, I think we talked about this before, just people choosing not to understand the complexity of our community. And I'm talking about Black folk, and I'm going to continue to talk about Black folk and always shout for Black folk. And I want our contemporaries to understand, take an attempt to understand what we have to go through and how, and I don't want to, I'm not like a blame the man kind of person. I know it's tough. There are things we have to do, and I look at the position that I'm in, and I'm grateful for it. And there are choices I had to make along the way, and that's something that I want my people to be responsible for, is the choices that you make. Yeah. The circumstances that we have, we all have them. You have to find ways to work around them. You can't rely on someone else fixing it for you. Yeah. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that the other communities don't need to know our story. They don't. They need to still have a level of appreciation for the boundaries that have been placed in the boxes that our communities were put in, and to see people pushing the envelope and trying to not only break themselves out, but reach back and break the community out as a whole. It's a heavy burden to carry. And I know that other communities aren't carrying that. And I want to make sure that we always point that out, that we are carrying that weight.
Yeah, you said, it's a heavy burden to carry, plus one to that. But I also think in a lot of ways, it's like the only burden worth carrying. Like,
it is.
I love it. What I used to use the analogy all the time, like, what good does it mean for me to learn to swim if I can only swim in like a cesspool? And so, like, painting the picture for you, like, if I get on and I look out for me and, I achieve and, I make strides, that's great. But if I look around and everyone is still struggling, how great are those strides that I'm making? And so, like, I do fundamentally believe we are all connected.
Yes.
I am you are me. And so, like, it is a burden to carry, but I think, like, if there is a burden that we're going to carry, it should be that one. How do we ensure that those around us, those, who grew up with us, grew up in circumstances, have same lived experiences, have gone through the same struggles and challenges, like, are given opportunities or take opportunities so that they can live out their dreams and wishes.
And to your point, when you call off the resume, in our community, technically that's enough. Without carrying the burden of trying to pull up everybody, like trying to push the community forward, just education, job, salary, picket, that's enough for some people. but we make the choice for it not to be enough.
Yeah.
We put our jobs online. We risk our finances. We risk our time.
Yeah.
We decide to take a harder route when we don't have to. We can literally sit back and bask in, I went to UR and I have a certain job, and that should be enough.
Like
but we choose it.
I study a lot of like energy work, I guess.
There you
And
go.
I think energy is powerful. And like, you know, I go to Bare Soul Yoga, Black-owned yoga studio in Richmond. Shout out to Ashley Williams and the Well Collective. And their mantra, their affirmation before and after every class is, when I am well, we are well. And from like an energetic standpoint, I really think no matter like the job you have, the salary you make, you know, the place you live, the car you drive, things, you know, that you can put on your rap sheet, you know, the degrees you have, all of those things, like, if we're not doing right by people and exchanging that good energy, like none of that shit matters. And I think above all things, like one of the things that I think was elevated or just illuminated, highlighted through the pandemic is like, everything can just dissolve and go away in the blink of an eye. Like you wake up and the world is flipped upside down. And so if we are not intentional about making sure that we do right by people, like we're not living at all.
Agreed. And the sense of community, I am well, when I am well, we are well. I love that. So I'm going to we'll make sure we'll link not only the studio that you go to, but we'll definitely link North 24 Home. Make sure y'all go cop that. But I firmly believe, I think our generation will be the generation that holds us accountable to what we've been saying as a country. We've been saying we're a melting pot. We've been saying we're all in this together. We've been saying even on our currency, in God we trust, but we have not been acting like we, right? And so the act of immersion that it takes, whatever that takes, that burden, it's well worth it. It is heavy. And sometimes, be honest, these conversations for me are therapeutic because it lets me know in whatever way I'm carrying it. Oh, by the way, because sometimes you could be off on an island in your own wilderness and that be heavy. And it's not until you look over and you find out somebody else is in the wilderness carrying their stuff too. And so it feels good to know other people feel that weight as well and what they're doing. But I think ultimately it takes a village. Our ancestors understood this. Our ancestors understood this. And they went through, in my opinion, some of the most heinous things in history. And still they kept pushing.
Yeah.
In spite of.
Yeah.
Right? And so for me, I just feel like it's refreshing and rewarding to know that there's other people in this as well. And so
choose it. Other
that are
choosing.
Yes. Yeah, because not everybody is choosing that. But the ones that do choose it, I appreciate that. And Toria, I do consider you one of those people. So please continue doing what you're doing. If there's any way we can help, assist, broadcast, amplify, let us know. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, this is tough.
I don't have anything to say.
You know, coming into this, so like I've been on a couple of podcasts, and maybe this is like the difference between like men and women. Like I've recorded with a lot of women-led, founded podcasts, and like 2 weeks before, like they're sending like the plan, like these are the questions I'm gonna ask. So I came in here like real like anxious, like I don't know what we're talking about. I'm thinking like somebody's sons, and like what's the leading like intro line you have about like men
winning
and
the war with themselves.
Yeah, I'm like,
with actions in a
how am I help men win the war with themselves? Like I'm thinking like, you know, what am I going to contribute? But I this has been a great conversation. So I'm really grateful and humble for you all inviting me to be a part of this conversation. Yeah. It's an important one.
Yeah. First of many, hopefully.
Yeah.
We can share this with you. So what will end up happening is, based on the way our conversation flowed today, I feel comfortable sharing this. What this has morphed into is this idea of media that creates proximity between people and communities. And so when you said, I am well, we are well, I fully believe that. what this has morphed into is that the umbrella for all of our content will be called proximity media. And we want to be very intentional with the content that we put out there because we want it to be exactly what you're doing for those businesses, that we want to be able to create a bridge. And there are some people in the majority that need this type of content to guide them to so many times we've told them, well, you just need to go over there and figure it out. You need to go talk to them. And they don't. We've had a white guy sit here, Jamie Clark, and he said, look, I consider myself one of the good ones. And I didn't even know. Like, I didn't know what else I could be doing to help in this regard.
And, proximity, like, I don't know if you've read any of like Brian Stevenson's or listened, but he talks about the power of proximity and like, you really can't help until you are comfortable with getting up close and personal and proximate to people, whether that's community, individual. So like, I love it. Yeah.
So he doesn't know this. This is, oh my God.
Pointing at me? When you say he?
No, Brian, the guy who came up with the whole concept. Well, I don't think he's the first person to come up with it, but he branded it proximity, right? There's a young lady that I host proximity dinners with in Atlanta, and we intentionally clash cultures. So we'll have Toria, the executive, and we'll sit her next to small business owner who's sitting next to newly commercial developer in Petersburg, who's sitting next to sophomore in college. And you bring these people together and you're creating proximity. And the way we do it is we call it exclusive inclusion. So what ends up happening is to be there, you have to be invited. So you have to have proximity to one person. But when you get there, you don't know anybody else.
I love it.
Right? And so that is where that started. From there, what we have seen is people from there have watched our content and said, yo, I'm learning more about people that don't look like me, particularly Black and brown people. Yo, we need your podcast. You got to keep, what do we do? How do we get this in the hands of more people? In reverse, we've had people like Chris watch other content. We started a new podcast called Bigger Than You Think. And the idea is that people's story is bigger than you think. So Toria on paper, that doesn't define who Toria is. You got to actually create proximity to her to figure out, oh, snap. Like, I didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
So the young lady that we had on there, the very first guest, was the young lady that I hold these proximity dinners with. And Chris said, out of his own mouth, on camera, he was like, yo, I would have never thought I had that much in common with that white woman. There's no way.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's why I think our generation, like, it's heavy, but we the ones.
Yeah.
Like, we gonna be the ones that really move.
And I mean, a big part of it is like affirming it. If you say you're the one, you can be the one. Like, so,
Yeah. This is awesome.
This is amazing.
Super awesome.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Somebody's Son podcast. We encourage you to share this episode with a friend. And remember, on this path called life, you are not alone. Thank you for watching. Until next time.
She liked the way that I finessed it. She stared so long, she let